Well, hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. Okay, so Raise the Titanic, a 1980 film. I just finished watching this. I had wanted to see this for a while because I've watched pretty much most of, throughout my life. I've seen, not all, but most of the documentaries and most of the different little things that have been released um, regarding the story of the Titanic. But I had never seen Raise the Titanic, and what I do know is that a lot of Titanic enthusiasts and researchers and that, like people that became interested at a young age of that era, in the story of the Titanic, became interested in it through this movie. So I totally respect that 100%, and I can understand that from watching it. But honestly, I don't know. I didn't really think it was that good of a movie, and it's nothing really to do. I'm gonna veer away from mentioning any sort of comparisons to 1997's Titanic, because I know that wouldn't be fair with the year this came out and all that. But it honestly has nothing to do with the year it came out and the kind of filmmaking. I mean, the aesthetic of the film is really good. Say for another kind of movie, even for another sci-fi kind of movie, because this isn't really historical. This is more sci-fi. It's like adventure sci-fi, and basically it details these researchers who are tasked to raise up the Titanic, and basically there's something of very great importance that they feel was being secretly transported on the Titanic. So they want to, these researchers want to raise this up, and because they do not have the money or the capability to perform all of these endless expeditions down to the Titanic wreck and all of that. So it's not really a historical movie. It's definitely sci-fi. So the aesthetic of the film, I think, would work for a different kind of movie, but to me it just doesn't really fit in the in the sort of in this kind of story, basically, is what I'm saying. And there are a few things that I really love the ending shot, like when the Titanic is risen. I really love that. There's one other scene I really like. It's a really creepy scene, actually, because there's some submarines down at the wreck, and one of them implodes from exceeding its depth limit. And basically it's a really dark shot, like really dark waters, and you just see the submarine for a second, and then all of a sudden it just starts turning into they must have used some sort of chemical reaction with water or something to create this effect, because the image of the submarine just all of a sudden starts turning into this churning bot of boiling goo, pretty much, right? And it's quite a spooky scene, quite a creepy scene, really, and I enjoyed that, especially the dark waters and everything that it took place in. They did a good job with that scene. And I like when the Titanic actually rises out of the water, not even so much the first time you see that in the movie, but at the very end of the movie, like just before, kind of just as the end credits start, there's a final just like revisit sequence of the Titanic raising out of the water. Really cool shot, loved that. Yeah, there's definitely some good redeeming qualities to the movie. It has a late Alec Guinness in this movie, actually. Some fairly, I don't know them by name, but some known actors, like some actors that were in quite a few other things at the time, are in this. And yeah, as I said, there's a late Alec Guinness. And yeah, so it's not terrible. I don't hate it or anything, but I didn't have as good of a time with it as, I've heard some other people out there having. But mind you, I will say I was granted with being born in a time, well, actually not born in a time, but born relatively soon within a time that 1997's Titanic was out. So I had, a very different time of new of new ways to tell the story properly. You know, back in the day, they kind of had to come up with more creative things to do in along the lines of sci-fi, especially underwater stuff. You know, a lot of the straight up historical dramas of the time. You know, I find historical dramas, the older you go, the better they get, or the newer you go, the better they get. But in that in-between era, I wouldn't even, it's not even really to do with technology, but just the way people's mindsets were at the time. People had to come up with these, I don't even think creative's the right word, because I mean everything's creative, but they had to come up with um, these more abstract scenarios behind known stories to tell. So I get it for the time. Another thing that bothered me and again, I feel bad saying it bothered me because this movie was made in 1980 and the wreck wasn't first discovered until 1986. So I know that this was prior to the Titanic sinking, but I mean, still, there's tons of records out there. There's been tons of books written. There's, you know, all these old accounts of, you know, written accounts, and even still lots of footage. Actually, a lot of these people lived. There were cameras at the time of the Titanic. Most of the photos were taken long before hitting the iceberg or anything, and before that or after when they were being rescued by the Carpathia. But you know, there's all kinds of information out there, and there is footage and interviews with, you know, survivors of the Titanic, and you know, written interviews and books written and all kinds of things. Like, they could have done some more research and actually bringing some more aspects of the actual story of the Titanic up, rather than just turning it into a more sci-fi fantasy kind of thing. And yeah, no, it definitely, I don't think that when the another complaint is when the Titanic rose, because when you see it at the bottom, it's completely, you know, they did a good job of making it look rustic, like you can tell it's been down at the bottom of the ocean for a long time. But when it rises, I mean, it's still pretty rustic looking, but it's not nearly as rustic as when you see it underwater. Like, for some shots when it's coming up out of the water, it almost looks like a brand new Titanic coming out of the water rather than a wreck coming out of the water. So that's a complaint. And again, the thing I feel bad about mentioning as a complaint, because I know it was made prior to the discovery of the wreck, but again, there's information out there. The Titanic isn't broken in half, and the two pieces aren't separated. The whole wreck is 100% intact, other than the hole at the bow of the boat, at the bow of the ship, from hitting the iceberg, which, you know, like I said, I know I give leeway. Again, there's research, you know, witness accounts, you know, whether, you know, there was a long debate whether the Titanic broke in half, whether when it was still, you know, out of the water, or whether it was when it was completely submerged that it broke. But either way, there's many accounts claiming, you know, no one will ever really, I mean, you know, it broke in half, but it could be forever debated. But it's pretty much known that some people seen the ship breaking in half, and whether it broke in half when it was quite far under the surface of the water, or when it was still submerging. We know it broke in half, and there's lots of accounts of that, and so it can't help but just kind of be a bother on your mind, you know, when you're watching this movie, seeing it fully intact, when you know that's not how the wreck is at all. So yeah, I'm gonna grade the movie with a C+. I think that's a fair grading for my enjoyment of this movie. And as for the cheese grading, which, by the way, I do acknowledge I've forgotten the cheese grading in some of the other movie reviews I've done lately. As I mentioned, it's a new thing, and I'm going to try and remember to do it every time, but I have forgotten it. a little bit lately. But for the cheese grating for this, I don't know, it's kind of hard. I think I'm going to give it Baby Bell. I think I'm going to give it Baby Bell cheese because it's tangy and it's definitely cheesy, but it's not something that you would necessarily word that way because, I don't know, I mean, at the end of the day, it is a different abstract movie, so a cheese grating would be hard to come up with in general for it, so I think it's kind of a more different kind of cheese like Baby Bell would work for this one. And yeah, so C plus and Baby Bell. So there's my review for Raise the Titanic, everybody. I hope you enjoyed, and thank you very much for watching. Please come back for more.